Welcome to Head Heart Homefront, brought to you by the Barry Robinson Center, the country's leading behavioral health residential treatment center for military kids. I'm your host, Erin Lindstrom, and I'm so glad you're here. The Barry Robinson Center created this interview series to celebrate Military Family Month. We're bringing together mental health leaders to chat about building resiliency and healthy, happy families through the ups and downs of military life. We know military life can be challenging for our kids, and it can also present amazing opportunities. In these conversations, we talk about tips, tools, and techniques to navigate the highs and lows for both you and your children. The conversations have been incredible, and we are so excited to share this episode with you. Hey, I'm Erin Lindstrom. Welcome back to Head Heart Homefront. I am very excited for today's conversation with Rob McCartney, who is the CEO of the Barry Robinson Center. If you're not familiar with the BRC, it is a behavioral health system in Norfolk, Virginia, anchored by a 72-bed residential treatment center. Over the past 6 years, Rob has led the Barry Robinson Center's residential program's transition from a typical residential treatment center to a premier program whose primary mission is to help military-connected children and their families heal. Since 2013, the Barry Robinson Center has provided care to over 500 military children, adolescents, and their families from over 35 states and 4 countries. As the son of a CPA and professor of nursing, Rob says he was destined to become a social worker. He started his journey of helping young people while in college, working at a juvenile detention facility. After receiving his undergraduate degree from Michigan State University, Rob took time off to see the United States. But after several years of what his mother called wanderlust, he returned to Michigan State to earn his master's in social work. The first half of his career was clinically focused, working in a variety of settings, including foster care, residential hospitals, and outpatient, serving clients from age 5 to 85. Those that know Rob will tell you he's never truly grown up, and that's why he always migrates back to working with children. The second half of his career has focused on clinical and operational leadership. He has served as clinical supervisor, executive director, regional director of operations, chief operating officer, and chief executive director. Rob has experienced success in starting up new programs and turning struggling programs around. He credits his success to the terms he's been able to develop. He says, "I hire good people and try to stay out of their way." So I am incredibly excited to share this conversation with you. Without further ado, here we go. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Well, Erin, thank you for inviting me, and it's great to see you again.
Yeah, so your bio speaks for itself. Obviously, you are one of the people we've been looking most forward to chatting with. So to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit more about the Barry Robinson Center's work with the military community? And I would love to know a little bit about your leading philosophies.
Sure. The Barry Robinson Center, first of all, is a comprehensive mental health system. And the anchor part of our system is our residential program. When I took over about 8 years ago, we were not even a TRICARE provider. And I scratched my head. Here you are at the biggest Navy base in the world and surrounded by military personnel, and we weren't a TRICARE provider. So from a business standpoint, it made sense for us to move in that direction. What I found out very quickly was the big need for services for our military personnel. And one of the reasons I chose to go in the military and what I wanted to develop is my son-in-law is a retired Marine, but he's also 100% disabled. One of the reasons my wife and I came to the area was to be close to my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandkids. So my goal was to develop a program that if my grandkids ever needed this level of care, I would sleep at night. And so I feel pretty confident about that. But when we started the program, we started off very slow. And there used to be a group called KeyPro, which did all the licensing and accreditation for TRICARE. And we initially licensed about 24 beds. And about 2 months after we started in 2013, they called me and asked me to license the other beds. And then that was the beginning of us growing into only military. It was about 4 years ago. I woke up and was looking at numbers, and 85% of our kids were military connected. And I said, we're going all in. Wow. So our residential program is a niche program. All of our kids, parents are either active duty. They've retired. They have served. We've had families from the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, National Guard, the reserves, from all the branches. And we have grown as we have learned about military culture and starting to understand that military culture is pretty diverse. You know, it's diverse based on if you're enlisted versus officer. It's based on what branch you're in. It can be based on, what your job is. If you're special ops compared to folks who are not. And so what the saying I really like, and we were talking about that earlier, is in the treatment of military families, while they have a lot of similarities, and they certainly come from a background of service. When you've met one military family, you've met one military family. So the center has grown in the last 4 or 5 years on our focus on working with the military and understanding the impact of things of PCSing. And those who aren't military, those are the moves. Permit change of station, though there's nothing permanent about it.
Right.
The impact of going to multiple schools. Most people don't realize that a child that serves the 20 years with a parent is going to go to 9 different schools. And think about the impact of moving and being the new kid, the potential for teasing, the potential for being bullied. And we certainly see that. And then the whole issue of dad or mom being deployed and coming back. If there's been a combat related deployment, is the parent coming back with their own challenges with PTSD, or are they coming back with injuries?
Right.
We know too that when they've been gone, families configure to survive. So dad comes back, mom's in charge, and how do they reintegrate with that culture? It's interesting. My uncle was a Navy captain, and I asked him how he made this work. And he said, well, there's a lot of people who I walk around and they salute and I tell them to do stuff and they do it. However, the minute I cross the threshold at home, I understand I'm no longer in charge. Right?
Very humbling, yes.
Very humbling, but a good partnership too. And so understanding the support of the family and the role in the family and the culture. So to the best of my knowledge, the Barry Robinson Center is the only residential center in the country that is 100% focused on the military.
Wow, that's incredible. Can you, I'd love to know a little bit about the kids that you typically see there. What sort of struggles or challenges are they facing? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think our kids, when you talk about the clinical presentation, they probably present as other kids in the civilian area with same issues. So we see a lot of mood dysregulation / depression. We see a tremendous amount of anxiety. And I think that's definitely tied into the number of moves, to deployments. If they're not being deployed, maybe mom or dad just being gone for training for months at a time. It's like same thing I see a lot when I used to do a lot of work with first responders. Will dad or mom come back?
Right.
See a lot of anxiety. We see a lot of kids who have, again, we call it emotional dysregulation. And those are kids who are going to have impulse control issues. And maybe it's due to some frontal lobe issues. Maybe it's an executive functioning issue. We see it a lot of with diagnosis with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and some conduct disorder stuff. But I think you go into the fact that there could be that biological push. The other thing I've seen, and I've been working with TRICARE on this, is that the military as a group seems to adopt more than others do. And I think that, right? And people ask me, why is that? And I said, well, I think it's because that sense of service and helping others.
Wow.
And so when there's adoption, we know that there's probably, not always, but probably trauma that's going to be attached to that child. Certainly the challenges of reintegrating into a family.
Mhm.
If it's in a foreign adoption, then often you have medical complications that come with that. And so then you have a child that's adopted, and then all of a sudden you start to move around. So the challenge is of permanency. So some of those kids do okay, but some of them don't. And I think that's the point to make too of the type of kids we have.
Mhm.
Life is on a bell-shaped curve. And in military kids, there's some kids who thrive and do great. We had a young man whose dad was a naval officer. They loved the move. They embraced that. He ended up doing his Eagle Scout project at our center. He was accepted to both the Naval Academy and West Point. And, you know, he rebelled against his dad, the Navy captain, and went to West Point. And, right. And now he's graduated from there, and now he's a helicopter pilot. He and his brother is just became lieutenant commander on a ship, and he has a sister that's probably going to follow in his footsteps. And so this is a family that embraces the military culture. They could not wait for their next move. There's other families though that they just struggle from day one with it, and the children struggle, the spouses struggle, and for whatever reason, they're not able to develop the skills to navigate the challenges, or it's maybe the challenges are just overwhelming. And those kids, they've tried outpatient, they've probably been in an acute psychiatric hospital a couple times, and they're just more in need of more long-term care. Those are the kids that make it to the Barry Robinson Center. I say that because not every kid in the military is going to need the Barry Robinson Center.
Right.
And not every kid in the military is going to necessarily need counseling. Right. But a lot of them do. They do a lot of good outpatient work, and they navigate their childhood and adolescence and young adulthood just like their civilian counterpart.
Brilliant. So for families who are maybe looking into residential options, can you talk to us a little bit about things that they should look for in different places and different options, and things maybe to look out for?
Sure. Well, I think one of the big things I encourage families to look for is transparency. If you go to a residential program or any place and they say, whatever your problem is, we can treat it, I think you need to question that. If they can, good for them, and they are a better program than we are. You know, we understand there's kids we do better with and kids we don't do so well with. We're an open campus, so clearly we're not going to take a kid that's going to be a run risk. That would be dangerous to that child. And there's programs that need to specialize in maybe sexually reactive programs or eating disorder programs or even substance abuse programs. So I think transparency is important. There's also too that at a residential program, there's the therapeutic environment, the therapeutic milieu. And sometimes programs shouldn't take a kid simply because they may have not the right space for them or the right mix of kids at that time. And so programs just being able to be very candid about what they can and cannot do. The other thing I look for in a program is that when they can't accept the child, that they're helpful in finding an alternative placement. One of the things the Barry Robinson Center does is that if a family calls us, a referral source calls us, and we can't accept the child, we do our best to stay with the families till we can help place that child at a program that we feel comfortable with. Sometimes families have their own ideas, sometimes they don't stay engaged with us, but I'd probably say the majority of the time, 80% of the time, we're successful in helping find a more appropriate placement or an alternative placement. The other thing I would look at is ask questions about restraints, physical holds. Hopefully nobody's doing what we used to call mechanical restraints. I would be asking questions about seclusion. Hopefully nobody's putting kids in a room and locking the doors. We don't do seclusions. I would ask questions about the called intramuscular IM injections that are used for behavioral control. And sometimes that's an important part of the practice. But I can tell you, last year we didn't do any. This year, I think we've done one. I think understanding that, asking about what the ratio is. Do you have a full-time psychiatrist? I think on our website, we actually have a compare and contrast form that people can pull out and get. Yeah. And, and certainly ask about, what are other treatment modalities? Um, we have a Boy Scout program. It's not a therapy, but it's very therapeutic. We have a strong music program. Again, it's not therapy, very, very therapeutic. Do they do yoga? Do they do mindfulness? Asking those questions, because not every child is going to be able to engage in individual one-on-one talk therapy.
Right.
Right. And do they have a robust rec therapy program? Because understanding kinesthetics, kinesiology, and how that impacts on the memory, understanding that often trauma gets held into our bodies, and what we can do with that through OT or rec therapy. So I think understanding another big part is dietary. What are they doing? Do they have a full-time dietitian? The role of food that plays on that. So there's a list of things that if I was a parent, I'd be looking for. I'd ask how often do they see the psychiatrist? Do you have a full-time psychiatrist, or is it a contracted psychiatrist? Not to say having contracted psychiatrists is bad, but if they have a full-time employed doc that's there on their own, that's important information to have. Again, it wouldn't necessarily be the final judgment, decision-making. I would ask questions about school. Our military families that we've experienced are very concerned about their school for their child. A lot of our kids who are coming are college prep. They're worried about losing that high school credit and matriculating into college. It's often one of the things is balancing out, understanding parents that, yes, we're going to help them ensure they can move forward with their education, but is it the moving forward with this high level of education that is causing problems? And on the other end of the spectrum, right, is kids who are coming to us with severe ADHD, focusing issues in college. What are we doing to address that? What are the classroom sizes of that? We run with our little kids. We run about 5 kids in a classroom. Our older kids, anywhere from 8 to 10, depending on the grade level, the grade level, and as well as the subject matter. So there's those types of questions to be at. Visitation is a good one. I used to tell parents, and still do, if you really want to know a program, just show up on Saturday morning about 10 o'clock and ask for a tour. This is before COVID, right? And when I was first, and maybe the second year I was there, I get a phone call from one of my employees, and they said, there's somebody here for a tour. And they said, you told them they could stop by anytime. What should we do? And I said, give them a tour. And I talked to the parents afterwards, and they said, they walked to the teenage boys' dorm, and mom said it smelled like a locker room. And she knew then we were not trying to hide anything, that's what it's supposed to smell like. But one of the nicest compliments I get when parents who have toured is they see the smiles on our staff and the smiles on the kids. And so something is going right when that's what the parents are sharing with you. I tell parents too, the Barry Robinson Center doesn't get it right all the time, but we get it right most of the time. So the other thing that I ask with parents too is what's the availability or access do they have to leadership? And if you think of a private school setting, if my kid's in private school, I want to have access to that principal, not just the teacher, but also the principal. And the center's the same way. Every parent gets my business card. Every parent has the green light to give me a call. I encourage the use of texting. This is their child. And we take a lot of responsibility, and we take it very seriously about the care of the child. And we understand that this can be anxiety producing for parents. I also know too that parents are going to hear things from kids and staff that I may need to hear. And I tell parents to just give me a call. We do about once a quarter. I used to do called Breakfast with the Boss, Saturday morning, come in, let's have breakfast. Again, with COVID, that moved to Zooming with the boss, right? And so we had our second Zoom meeting last Wednesday, and where parents had the opportunity to meet each other, talk as a group, and to ask me questions about programming. And with the COVID issue, there's been a lot of questions early on, especially. So again, the communication level. And again, I just go back to the feeling of transparency.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And those questions are such great starting off points. I imagine that a lot of times when you're coming into this and kind of learning the world, right? And you don't even know what you don't know. So
Right.
hearing like your perspective and kind of how to look around, and it sounds too like the vibe is a part of it, and how does it feel interacting with the people and the staff there? Like you can learn a lot from being.
Right. Right. That's why the COVID stuff has sort of hurt us a little bit because we love giving tours, and we still give tours, but now everybody's masked up. We
Right.
got to separate things out. So it's not quite the same.
Right.
So we're looking forward to the COVID going away so we can get back to that piece.
Absolutely. And so, Rob, for parents who, or anyone really, who may be listening, and you mentioned this, like as a parent, I imagine there is anxiousness and there is fear around, letting your child go somewhere and having to trust other people to take care of them. Is there something that you would say, or a message that you want those parents who are kind of in that situation to really hear?
Yeah, I think that when parents and families come to us, they've been through a very rough road. Nobody wakes up and kids doing fine, say, today we're going to take our kid to residential. There's been outpatient services. There's probably been some school issues. There's been the acute psychiatric hospitalization, maybe partial hospitalization. There's been a lot of services, and there's a lot of frustration, and parents are tired, and the kids are tired. So I think that, and also parents feel guilty. And they also feel that they failed. And I think it's important for parents to hear is that those are valid feelings. We all, when we have that baby, have that kid, our hope is that our child is successful and moves on and has a great family. None of us ever think that when we have a child that they're going to need residential someday. And parents who care, my experience, is that they look back and say, what could I have done different? What did I miss? And I certainly would ever not want to minimize that, but I also understand parents who have done their best. And, sometimes life just pounds us and we don't have all the resources that we need to help our child. So while I wouldn't let that immobilize you. Also, I let parents know is that some of your children, not all of them, are going to try to manipulate you with that guilt to get them out of the center. And to, when your child calls to share what's going on, to listen discreetly, not to dismiss what they say, because they need to be heard regardless, and that is their experience. But to understand that it's going to be through their eyes and through maybe their desire to leave.
Right.
And I would say parents ask a lot of questions. And there's hope. I think that's the big thing, is that there's hope.
I love that.
And I often tell parents to meet with them, I say, your kid's here, your kid's safe, go get a good night's sleep.
Yep. Well, that is beautiful. Rob, thank you so much for taking the time for having this conversation. I know there are so many tidbits in here that are going to be helpful for parents and listeners out there. And thank you for all the work you do at the Barry Robinson Center.
Well, thanks, Erin. And, to the folks who are listening out there, feel free anytime to give the center a call. You can always reach out to myself with questions or concerns or ideas. And if you are wanting to go into this field and work with us, maybe something we can do to help you with that too. But this has been great. And Erin, thank you for your taking the time to do this program for us.
Yeah, my pleasure. You've been listening to Head, Heart, Homefront, a production from the Barry Robinson Center, the country's leading behavioral health residential treatment center for military kids. Many times, kids with behavioral and mental health issues don't improve with typical treatment options in their community. Families may need to consider long-term residential care, and this is where the Barry Robinson Center excels. They're a mission-focused nonprofit organization based in Virginia. Their residential center is the only one in the country that works exclusively with military kids. They understand the military community, as many of their employees are military connected. Their high-quality treatment includes a wide range of services to help improve the lives of children. If your child needs additional support, check out barryrobinson.org. Navigating mental health can be challenging, and we want you to know that you do not have to do it alone. Thank you so much for listening to Head, Heart, Homefront. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let us know with a 5-star review if you're listening to the podcast, or a like, comment, or share if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube. Until next time, be well.